Hey, Justin here. Heads up, this is part two of a two-part episode. If you haven't already listened to the first half, I recommend you go back and listen to it first. And now we'll pick back up and hear about how Lauren reconciled her Jewish and gay identities.
But yeah, to answer your question from before, how is my Jewish identity, my gay identity, and how did it intertwine when coming out? It was really tough. It was really tough. And um I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue in the UK. So the UK doesn't have tons of different strains of Judaism like we have in America. And it was sort of, you're either Orthodox or you're Reform. And we were Orthodox. Men and women sat separately in synagogue. It was only a man was allowed to be a rabbi. It was very, very sort of it was those sort of gender rules.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew something felt a little off to me. I was like, this doesn't feel like something I really connect with. And honestly, it was only until I started spending time in America that I understood that you could be Jewish in many different ways.
Hmm.
And it was beautiful to connect with conservative Judaism, more Reform Judaism, and those strains of Judaism, not only do they like embrace the gay community, there is massive there is tons of communities of gay rabbis, of trans rabbis, of people, non-binary people, who are very, very involved in those strains of Judaism. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's not only accepted, but it's celebrated. Look, not everywhere in Judaism, it's becoming more so, but it's and that in my later in my later years, like I'm sounding like I'm 100, but um but in the last sort of 10 years, that's been so healing for me. And I wasn't it wasn't a massive repression being Jewish and being gay. There was other nuances for me. In particular, I have a gay brother, and that really I thought there could only be one gay sibling in each family. And now we know that 30% of gay people have a gay sibling, and whatever the stats are. But so there was other things that went into it, but certainly it was very tough coming out in an Orthodox Jewish community. So much so that I only really came out publicly when I moved to America. When I physically removed myself from that
Mm-hmm.
environment is when, within 4 weeks of moving to America, I was exploring my sexuality. And that's been very interesting to unpack in therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, you know, living the American gay experience and growing up in rural Iowa,
Mm,
I can identify that, in that home environment, it's not something you explore, you push it down, you hide
right.
it. And it's not until I think for many, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think for many in America, the gay experiences, if you're in that kind of repressive environment or conservative environment, you remove yourself from it and go find a new place where you can almost be anonymous to
Right.
explore like what that is and what that means for you. Um, and it's interesting that you found this kind of um, freedom. Good Lord, this is like so American. This freedom coming to the States in
Freedom.
number one, being able to express your religion, but also being able to I come to terms and find your sexual identity.
Yeah. And the two are very intertwined. Like, I only look at Judaism and being gay in a positive light, intertwined
Mm-hmm.
together. I don't look at it in any sort of negative way at this point in my life. And I think I think being accepted by the Jewish community helped me accept myself. And again, not only accepted, like celebrated, like pushed to talk about it. I remember studying with a rabbi where we specifically studied gay subtones of the Torah, and sort of like different sexual experiences that are talked about in the Torah that could have like a queer meaning. Like that's the stuff that I, that I do, how those two of my identities are intertwined. It's like so intertwined and so celebrated. So I only
Yeah,
have positive views of being Jewish and gay in the same sort of breath.
that's incredible. It's incredible because I have a very different relationship with many religions just because
Mm.
um I find their exclusion of, you know, primarily sexual identity, but secondarily their exclusion of so many other things. Religion, you know, in the US being used to oppress groups of people.
Yeah.
And you know, and not just in the US, across the globe, religion being used to oppress. And I don't think that that's, I don't know, when you go read the words, that's not what it's supposed to be about, right?
Yep.
And so that's where I've always had this like bristle, and as an adult, because what's interesting when you talk about kind of, you didn't realize there were multiple ways to be Jewish until moving to the States. I actually, growing up, and I don't talk a lot about kind of my spiritual upbringing, but my family raised me as Lutheran,
Mm.
and I really respect the way that my mother approached my kind of spiritual upbringing, because you know, in the Lutheran religion, you're kind of considered an adult once you are confirmed and go through
Mm.
confirmation. And so that was her kind of like, you will get through confirmation. And then from there, you are, you know, by the Lutheran religion, spiritually an adult. So then you go figure out where you go from there. And what I respect the most about that is that it gave me a foundation that I
Mm.
could work from. And then, you know, thankfully, my natural curiosity also pulls me in different directions. So before I was confirmed at a younger age, my babysitter went to a Baptist church. And so I would attend the Baptist church with them. And at a very young age, remember, you know, accepting Jesus as my personal savior and, you know, being born again. And so I concurrently attended a Baptist church and a Lutheran church,
Mm.
and could kind of, you know, while they're both Christian religions, could differentiate what was going on between the two. And I think that's what led to then, you know, once I was 18 and left home, what kind of led to some of my spiritual liberation was understanding some of the hypocrisy that happens within all of that. And for me, there was a rejection of, you know, my church was emailing me trying to fundraise as a freshman in college. And I'm like, so I don't attend your church anymore and I don't have any money. So sorry, no. And started to see it as like this fundraising thing. Anyway, um, there's my tangent on my religious and spiritual upbringing. But that's why
Yeah.
today, like, I consider myself spiritual
Mhm.
on my own terms, like in my own ways, but I don't ascribe to any particular scripture.
Yeah. And that's it. I've had conversations. It was just Passover, and not to make this, again about me and Judaism. One thing about me is I can make everything about me. So here we are. But it was just Passover last week, and I hosted a Seder, a Passover Seder, is a dinner where you talk about the story of Jews, the Exodus
Mhm.
from Egypt. And we had some non-Jewish folks around our table, and they were sort of blown away by, I actually, there was a prayer that I found thanking non-Jewish people for sitting around our Passover table, because there's so many people that would not come and attend a Jewish event. They just wouldn't, and they sort of couldn't believe it. They were like, thank you for thanking us. Like, what? The Christian religion sort of would, I don't think would ever, do that, or whatever it might be. So it's really interesting. And we were having a conversation about being gay. We were all gay at the table, and being gay and being Christian, being gay and being Jewish, and your sentiment, what you just said and how you grapple with it, but the spirituality side of it helped grow your identity, is pretty much
Mhm.
exactly what our friends were saying at the table. So I hear that when I talk about being Jewish and being gay, I hear your side of it a lot from the Christian standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that comes up for me, so when you're talking about Passover, is that, we also, Easter was this past weekend, for the Christian religion, Passover, and there's other holidays, other religious holidays around this time. And I saw someone post on Facebook, um, Sunday, Monday, something like that.
Mm.
And it was like, however you celebrate, this is a time of rebirth and renewal and
Yes.
blah, 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 something. And that hit me. And I was like, oh, wow. Like that's where when I tap into spirituality, it's like, oh, well, there's actually, you look across all of the religions, and interestingly enough, there are holidays and the types of holidays that align around the calendar. So whether you call it Christian or Jewish or, any other religion, there's something energy wise, spirituality wise that's happening for us collectively.
I think as humans, we need it. We need something bigger than ourselves to look to. You know, we
Mhm.
we need like a higher power, the universe, whatever you might call it. It's so essential to be able to look out just outside of our own brains and our own worlds
Mhm.
and have something, tied to spiritually. I think I will always I will always appreciate that in myself and in other people as that spiritual side of it. It's so I think it's so grounding and so helpful to
Mhm.
be okay, not everyone cares about what you're saying, like we are a chain of bigger events and things happening outside of us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, for me, bringing it back to creating belonging and the creating belonging model is when we can shift to that perspective
Hmm.
that, kind of like lifting up to more of that when it comes to religion, in how religion can impact someone's belonging, you
Hmm.
know, going back to the core of love, going back to the core of including people, and community, and that whatever it is, we all may have some higher being that we're looking to, um, and getting out of those repressive components of what people in pulpits are telling us.
Right, right. And that's thinking for yourselves, ourselves being individuals and doing, I was saying this to you before, but doing the work individually on ourselves. Like we got to understand ourselves before we're able to anchor our
Mm-hmm.
identities in other things. It's like I've seen people anchor their identities in the wrong things because they were looking outside of themselves. And so
Mm-hmm.
doing, along with doing the inner work, you'll find your identities, you'll find things that are lying beneath the surface
Mm-hmm.
that you really can, or you do anchor yourselves in, even if we're not labeling them as identities. Like they are like, values and what's your purpose. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
you led us through a workshop, like understanding our own individual purpose. And it still sticks with me. I still use it, 3 companies on. Um, so I think even that as an identity is important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. um I think the one thing that I want to pull out of that, and to kind of put the punctuation point on the conversation, is that idea of self-awareness and doing the internal work. Because for me, that is the if well, two things that I want creating belonging to do. I
Mhm.
want it to, number one, get us to dig into ourselves and understand more about ourselves, dig into self-awareness. I think, Carl Jung said every advance of humankind only happened through self-awareness. And
Right.
so if we can dig into our self-awareness, and then secondly, embrace and accept others, and choose love over anything else.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so I think,
I have a question for you on that.
yeah, yeah,
Why do you think it's so hard for people to accept other people? If I'm just out here living my life and someone really disagrees, like why is it so hard for them to just accept that?
yeah. Well, so I think, if we look biologically, we are wired. So in our need to be a part of a community, in our need to be a part of a tribe, we also sort for likeness.
Mm.
And so this is where I talk a lot about the prehistoric parts of our brain that get in the way of modern life.
Ah,
Because yeah, 2000 years ago, when we were living in tribes, were we alive 2000 years ago? Yeah, we were. When we were
well,
living in tribes, and um absolutely, we needed to quickly understand who was in and who was out for our own safety, for our own survival. But today, the threats are not the same, but we still have the same prehistoric brain. And it's that prehistoric brain that is saying, they're different from us.
right.
So we need to push them away. They're a threat. And that's where I think we have to do a lot of work to override the prehistoric parts of our brain to understand, no, that's not a threat anymore. That individual is not a threat anymore. That, whatever it is, isn't actually a threat. But it's hard because it's a part of our brain that also keeps us alive every day, right? It does also get us to jump out of the way of danger. And
Right.
that's why I think we push people away. And it's like you said, when we're not digging into self-awareness and we're only paying attention to what's outside,
Yeah.
it's very easy then to quickly sort likeness versus not likeness, and then just push those that are not like us away.
Mm. That makes so much sense. Because I find myself doing it as well, and I think that's where we go into overbearing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think overbearing is one of the quadrants in the model that we can't we might not be able to see in the moment as much as other people can see it in us. So,
Yes.
I think that's a really interesting one. And I think that's the quadrant where if we're living in that quadrant, or I guess I'll talk for myself, when I was living in that quadrant, that's when I needed to do a lot of inner work. So I'm not saying like
Mm-hmm.
being overbearing is like always terrible, but
Mm-hmm.
there's probably things knocking at the door that we're not answering.
Yeah. Yes, the thing with overbearing is that we may not realize it when we're there,
Mm.
but it is very likely that we're doing others harm while we're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's actually why, so early on in the creation of creating belonging and building this work, I created an assessment because I wanted people to have a tool that they could use to quickly identify, through a series of questions, where do I sit on the model? And I found that it was doing the work disservice because we are really good at overestimating ourselves.
Yeah.
What's the stat I used recently that, actually, I think Al said it on an earlier episode. 93% of the population thinks that they're above average drivers,
I
right? Well,
heard that. Yeah.
yeah. So, um, so we overestimate ourselves. And so we're like, oh, I'm in belonging. Everything's great. Like, I'm really accepting of others. But there's so many blind spots that we have and we don't realize it. And so what I found, I burned the assessment because I didn't ever want it to do a disservice of the work of it allowing people to not go into deep reflection.
Right. Right. You don't want to like force people into a box just because they have to, if that's not, if that's different for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. So there is, I think we can be in overbearing and not realize it. So we do need to, again, go into self-reflection and also ask others. I love how all this is coming back together because there's Al talked about the idea of internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. So what we know about ourselves and then what we learn from other people and how other people see us and how we show up in the world. And so we need both of those things to balance.
Right. Yeah. No, I listened to that episode with Alan. It was incredible. It was really eye-opening. And it made me think about social signals. And, when someone's talking to me about a topic I literally could not care less about, you can tell in my face. And I'm like, like I need to change, like I need to, that's a social signal for me that I need to tweak. And I think we have a lot of those. We don't realize our social signaling all the time. Like I've probably been sat here on this video like not smiling and like looking disinterested to my natural face, but and that's also social signaling, like internal, external. So it is
Yeah.
very interesting. I promise we can stop now, but I'm just
I
enjoying
know.
our conversation. I know.
You're making me think how much I'm conscious of that, and it's so weird in this new environment because I'm literally like staring at a camera, and I'm so used to staring at a camera and smiling and giving these signals that I'm interested, because that's what I'm trying to portray over cameras. We're on all of these Zoom calls, and I'm constantly communicating over Zoom. But anyway, Lauren, this is incredible, and I'm probably we're just going to do this whole conversation because it was an amazing conversation, and I hope you all stuck around with us and found it as engaging as I've found it engaging. Lauren and I could probably continue talking, and we probably will. But I want to thank you all for joining us in this episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Lauren, I always want to make sure that I'm giving my guests an opportunity to shout out anything that they want to shout out, self-promotion, whatever it is. So here's your opportunity. What would you like to share or invite people to connect with you?
Wow. That's the hardest question you've asked me. Yeah, just like follow me because I like ego boosts, So I'm Lauren Glazin on Instagram and LinkedIn. Connect with me, ask me any other questions that you have. And I love this model, Justin, and I appreciate you so much for inviting me and giving me a space to talk about some of this stuff.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Lauren. Thank you so much. And we'll see you all again on another version of the Creating Belonging podcast. Thanks.
Thank you.